Adventure Time is a beautifully written show about a post-apocalyptic future taking place thousands of years after the rise and fall of humanity, leaving the environment for a cast of fantasy creatures and a single human boy, the apparent last of his kind. It's about disillusionment, family, loneliness, growing up, relationships, nature, government, and much, much more. Over 10 seasons, we see characters grow, die, be born, and be reborn. We see reincarnation and reassembly of identities. We see friendships cross boundaries, political, biological, and physical. We see stories told, retold, and forgotten. We see people change, and we see the world change, and we see people who feel like they can't change do exactly that. We see lives cut short, and we see lives extended to immortality. And we see these things most clearly in some of the episodes that seem to mean nothing at all, where the events of those 10 minutes seem to have no impact on any overarching plot. Because it is, as is true in real life, it's often the small, inconsequential adventures that make the most impact on us. Of these, one of my absolute favorite episodes is called Jake the Brick, Season 6, Episode 20, which follows Jake, a shape-shifting yellow dog, as he attempts an experiment where he acts as a brick in a crumbling brick shack. Jake has a few of these existential moments throughout the show, where he contemplates what it means to grow old, as Jake realizes that, although he's past the point of growing up, he's still changing, but doesn't quite understand what any of that change is supposed to be. When Finn, his adopted human brother, visits the brick shack, Jake explains the experiment to him, and Finn, being a bit worried, leaves a radio at the base to stay in touch. Bricks don't stay in touch, Jake snaps, not wanting Finn's nerves to get in the way of his experiment, and Finn shrugs before heading back home. It's at this point where Jake starts to get bored, as the only thing he has to look forward to after Finn leaves is the dissipation of the brick shack, and all he can do to that point is sit and wait. And as the sky changes color, Jake spots a bunny digging around in the brush neighboring the brick shack. He narrates the bunny's actions as it forages for food, telling a story and explaining the nature of survival to empty air as far as he can tell. And after the bunny is chased off by a deer, Finn chimes in on the radio. He asks Jake if he needs anything, and what the bunny was doing, but Jake tells him off again, claiming that the bunny is completely unrelated to the experiment, and Finn leaves him be. Jake looks back up to where the bunny is sleeping, a small shelter at the base of a tree, and begins narrating it falling into a hungry rest, surrounded by the simple beauties of a summer evening, as the sun falls and Jake himself begins to drift off. He's then woken abruptly by thunder, and sees rain and wind pelting the brick shack, threatening its fall at any second. He laughs, overjoyed that his unpredictably boring journey is perhaps coming to an end, but quickly changes his attitude about the storm when he sees that the bunny's home was being threatened. If a definition of bravery exists, this must be it, he begins. A lone bunny facing off against the elements, ineffectually pushing around some twigs with his pink bunny nose, a symbolic gesture perhaps, but sometimes that's all we have. What Jake doesn't realize, as he says this, is that he has an audience, as Finn has brought the radio to a friend's radio station, and the bunny story was being broadcast across the entire land. We see faces of old friends, all tuned into the station, letting it play in the background as they go about their activities through the stormy night. Some faces we see almost every episode, like close friends and family, and some we haven't seen in a long, long time, stored in the back of our minds, their names worn away from our memories. The storm worsens, and Jake's voice begins to panic, but he can't help as he has dedicated himself to being a brick in the falling down brick shack. Luckily for the bunny, a group of beavers pass by and decide to build a dam before the entrance of the warren in which the bunny resides. They shelter it before working, and as they work on the dam, a passing sealard, a completely made-up animal, offers a helping hand. All the while, Jake narrates with awe as strangers come together to give hope and shelter to a struggling animal, giving them personalities and backgrounds, explaining what a sealard may be doing so far from the sea, and we see the audience fall into sleep, lulled by the tapping of tails on humble structures of dirt and twig. In the morning light, few signs remain of the summer storm that battered this idyllic glen. The beavers are finished with their work and are headed home. The sealard looks like she's going to wander the woods for a while. Maybe she'll find her way back to the ocean and write a novel about her experiences. Mr. Bunny is exhausted, but can rest easy, knowing that his home is secure. But as the bunny begins to drift, the deer comes back, and after testing the bunny's defenses, he jumps and begins to smash at the dam. Jake continues to narrate in horror as the bunny flees to safety, and they both watch as the walls cave in, and then the tree with them. We see the stunned faces of our friends as they listen helplessly to the sound of wood giving way and the crash of the tree beside the shack. It was over. The bunny's home had been destroyed, and now it had nothing. But as Jake began mourning for the bunny's loss, it instead adapted, finding a hole in the fallen tree and resting there. Even the deer does a double take, as if surprised at how little the bunny is bothered. Jake cheers for it. "Ladies and gentlemen, this bunny is indomitable," he cries, and the audience cheers with him, a cascade of smiling faces, of whistles and joy and pride. In his excitement, Jake denounces his experiment and slides from his spot in the wall, and that exact force is what causes the brick shack to collapse without him. It's as if the revelation that simple survival and comfort is more integral to life than decay was the exact thing the structure needed to fall. Life is meant to be lived, after all, not meant to end. And as Finn calls Jake one more time on the radio, his eyes fall on the sleeping bunny, inconsequential and seemingly purposeless to this great uncaring world, and decides finally to go home. So perhaps stories aren't meant for either the storyteller or their characters, as they never seem to truly fall on the ears of those involved. But Jake was only telling the bunny story to himself, and I'm sure if you'd asked him about it, he wouldn't have even considered himself a storyteller. Jake was just a brick in a wall of a falling down brick shack, an observer by accident rather than choice. And the bunny was hardly a protagonist, let alone a hero. It was just a creature at whims to the cruelty and kindness of nature. But we are all just creatures deep in our blood, even as distant as we find ourselves, lost in over-complex motions, our own way of foraging. And yet their cards were dealt, and their roles chosen. A brick in a wall became a voice on the wind, and a simple rabbit going throughout its daily life became a struggling hero. What are we? Are we storytellers by accident? Heroes by circumstance? Are we inconsequential? Are we nothing? To you I am a voice on the wind, perhaps a stranger, perhaps not, perhaps somewhere in between. And what are you, dear listener? Are you the unseen face of a friend or foe? Is your name lost to time in my own mind? Are you me? Am I you? But we are nothing. I am nothing. Bricks and crumbling walls are nothing. Bunnies and flooding warrens are nothing. Sealards are nothing. Shape-shifting dogs are nothing. The future is nothing, and the past is imagined. This is made up. It only happened because you lived it in your own mind, and now this story is a memory, just as vivid and colorful as any other. We are nothing, and so we are heroes, and so we are listeners, and so we are storytellers. We are all of these things, and we are nothing.